All right. Hello. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Um, I am so excited to be here with you this evening. Um, a few kind of boring things to get us started. Uh, Actually, I hope that you'll forgive me. I am genuinely happy to be here with you all today. Um, but I'm also feeling a little heavy. Um, I don't really know how to act authentically like myself right now. Uh, it's gonna be a weird vibe tonight. Now, kind of the boring stuff, and we'll start wading in. If you're new here, this is GLBT Issues in Literature. We're doing a guided reading of All Boys Aren't Blue and Zami, A New Spelling of My Name. And this is week 3 of this 16-week long course. Um, if you are also new here and you are here just to comment on what a woman looks like on the internet, no, you're not. Like, I'm happy for your conversation. I'm happy for your questions. But if you're just here to comment on what I look like, you can see yourself on out. You don't need to make an announcement or anything. I know how I look. I'm not really here for comments. So, with that kind of out of the way, when I was kind of promoting this module, right? I was promoting it on Substack, right, with my little Substack notes and all of that. Um, One thing that I talked about, and I want to actually pull the note itself up, and if I was smart, I would have done that before I started running my mouth, but I didn't. Um, I made a comment about um, creating worlds that fit when the everyday world does not. Um, And I've been thinking about that for the last few days. And maybe how that came across. And so I want to be really clear about what it is that I meant when I talked about creating new worlds. Um, because I think, kind of in the context of what we'll continue talking about this week, that really could come across like I was, um, excuse me, like I was trying to promote maybe a form of escapism. Um, to kind of ignore what is happening in our world right now. And that's not what I meant at all. Uh, when I talk about creating and imagining a new world, it's not because I'm blind to, I mean, really all the terrible things that are happening in our world right now. Um, 'Cause there were so many. There are so many just awful, awful things. It's because I see that terribleness, and I, perhaps maybe just for my own sanity, so maybe this is naive. I have to believe that a better world is possible. Um, Now another thing kind of within that context that I really have been thinking about, is I used to produce a podcast with my friend Adam Smith called Get Uncomfortable. And we had a guest on the show, Zach Ritter. Zach and Adam both just top-notch guys. They're just fantastic. Um, and one of the episodes that we did with Zach, and I hope you'll forgive me, I don't remember which one, but, um, I'll try to share it later on Substack when I track it down. Um, he taught um, he was talking about, kind of the Jewish belief, because he is Jewish, of a messianic age, right? Or um, for those of you who are not uh, living in theology all the time, um, it's really the idea that um, we are that in a messianic age, you're living in an environment where peace and love abound in a very like a functional and practical way. Um, and by practical, I mean tangible. I'm sorry for misspeaking there. Uh, but also that is possible without the presence of a Messiah. And so that's really is kind of what I think about when I'm talking about creating a new world is that, um, right, like we all have our faith traditions. Um, a Messiah is present in some of them, not in all of them, but that we can kind of have this um, age of peace and love and prosperity for all. If we can just kind of start thinking about things in a slightly different way than the patriarchal capitalist society that most of us are living in. Um, and kind of now pivoting into our module this week, um, I'll interrupt myself for a second here because I usually like to welcome people as they join. Substack Live is being a little funky right now, so all I can see is WWAF and Clyde. So the other two folks, I'm also glad that you are here. For whatever reason, I cannot welcome you by name. So I apologize for that, and I just wanted to name it. Um, Now, I shared at the beginning of this module that I've been making some changes to my own personal schedule. Just because of family needs. That I'm not necessarily gonna dive into all right now, but suffice it to say, sometimes things change in your family and you've got the grown-ups have to change their schedules a little bit. Um, and I was talking about this change in my own routine, and my own mental health support, um, because I've been thinking about family and family identity a little bit differently, uh, than maybe I had been until very recently. Um, Forgive me, I was looking around to see if I had any lotion. It's Minnesota in the winter. Your skin gets dry real fast. Um, but thinking about family and family identity a little bit differently, um, I think as young people, we really think of ourselves as um, our identity within our family unit that we grow up in, right? Um, right, that might be uh, more informed by my lived experience as an oldest daughter in a evangelical adjacent Christian family than as a mother now raising my own family in like a slightly more secular environment. And some of that and that is on purpose. um and so really right kind of making that mental shift as you like go along the path really of growing up uh is how is how it should be, right? Like you shouldn't always be like the middle child, I if you will, right, or whatever whatever it is. Um, and that kind of adopting that attitude of growth is part of what it takes to imagine and create a world that is better than it was previously. So now here we are in chapter 3 of Boys Aren't Blue. It's called Identity. Um, Now, if you have read All Boys Aren't Blue, and I know that some of you have, which is really awesome, you'll know that George Johnson talks a lot over the course of the book about living with his extended family, right? The family was all very close, right? Their grandma was right there providing care because the parents worked, cousins were in and out, uh, neighborhood kids were sometimes adopted as de facto family members. Uh, and while I find that just wonderful to read, it feels very alien to me as I'm, thinking about this on my own and kind of conceptualizing it, right? Um, and you might know about me if maybe if you were in my class last semester or over the winter break, I shared a paper that I wrote um, about the genre of Western television that Utah was home to me for much of my childhood. But then when my dad finished his doctoral degree, uh, we left my childhood home, which notably is also where all my extended family lived. We relocated to the state of Virginia. And I personally have to say the state of Virginia because we moved from there to northeastern Minnesota, uh, where one of the biggest, and like using heavy quotes here over biggest city is Virginia, Minnesota. Um, so that was an adventure, right? Just as a kid going through the things. Um, but it was just us, right? Like the eventually 6 of us kids and my mom and dad. Like most of the time I didn't have cousins around, I didn't have grandparents around, like all of that stuff. Um, but what is not foreign to me, at least about what he's talking about, is his commentary around agency in this chapter, and the ability, um, within your family dynamic to slowly and eventually choose your own identity. Uh, we'll be talking about this in a few weeks, but that sometimes, just as you're going along, your identity is kind of revealed to you. Uh, but as you're right beginning to kind of conceptualize this, right? Like, who are you? Like, and this is a little woo woo, but right, who are you on the inside? Um, and how do you take that and navigate in the world around you? Um, and as you're thinking about that, um, the very last paragraph in this chapter um, really, it's not even a paragraph, it really is a sentence, really sticks with me. And he says, let yourself unlearn everything you thought you knew about yourself and listen to what you need to know about those who navigate life outside the margins. Now, when I'm thinking about that, and I'm just now realizing that a few minutes ago I said this was chapter 3 of All Boys Aren't Blue. It's not, it's chapter 2. Um, it's been a long week. I don't know if any of you are feeling that way, but it's been a doozy for me. Anyway, um, when I'm thinking about unlearning everything that you thought you needed to know about yourself, I'm really thinking about this in the context of like socially defined gender roles, uh, right? Thinking back to George and being born with that full head of hair, right? That it, some of that might feel true to you, and um, it might not. And so, like, that unlearning process takes a lot of thoughtfulness, just to really get to know yourself. Um, now, based on Johnson's description of his like family upbringing, um, I would imagine this is extremely loud, right? Um, like, and I don't mean that in any kind of like a derogatory way. Just they're a big family and they seem pretty vocal. I imagine that it was a loud environment. Um, and so to me, this really stands in stark contrast to how Audre Lorde describes her family growing up. Um, Now, Audrey, and she, talks about this right throughout the book. Um, really, she has some pretty significant vision struggles as a child. Um, Seeing things and experiencing the world really in any kind of a visual medium was poor gal. It wasn't happening for her. Um, um, but because of that, um, I imagine that she was very quiet and had like it's just this very rich inner world that we know now through research, although I don't think that we really need research to help us figure this one out. Um, that children do have very rich inner worlds, um, and that if they are treated with compassion, um, we might be lucky enough to have them feel safe to share that with us. Um, but she talks about so I kind of got lost in my own brain there for a second. um, but then she talks about learning how to read, and this very kind librarian um, that taught her how to read. And then also, it was around this time as a very young child. It seems like she was describing herself around maybe like the age of 4. That she also learned how to spell her name. Um, Now, her given name is Audrey, Audrey. Um, she didn't like that spelling, even as a child. She spelled it that way to please her mother. Uh, because I know I mentioned that um, Audrey's inner world very quiet. But she describes her family as very loud and not, unfortunately, in the most loving of ways. Um, and she talks about this throughout her memoir as well. That keeping her mother happy was critical to just her general well-being. Um, and so we kind of see this juxtaposition, right, of um, Audre Lorde, young child in the 30s and 40s, uh, with parents that I'm sure loved her very much, um, and were ill-equipped to show that in a kind way. Um, and then we see, right, like years later, George Johnson, uh, also a loud family, but very kind, loving, um, really helping him. to embrace his full self as he grows into adulthood. Um, Now, kind of moving on to our journal article of the week, I thought it would be uh, appropriate, broadly, to talk about not adult literature, which obviously both of these memoirs are, um, but about children's literature and how, very specifically, um, reading children's literature that is maybe not uh, explicitly queer can be read in a queer lens, to really help us understand a diversity of lived experience. Uh, Now, in this section, I had been hoping to do something a little bit unusual and read out loud Where the Wild Things Are. Um, Unfortunately, it looks like reading a book like that in its entirety would be a copyright violation without the express written permission of the author and the publishing house. Uh, by the time I realized that, there was no way that I was getting permission from the author and the publishing house to read this live. So, um, I hope that you are at least passingly familiar with the story Where the Wild Things Are, um, since we'll be talking about that. And it's not a material that was provided in this week's module. But um, I'm bouncing back and forth a little bit, so I apologize for that. Um, Within this journal article, um, entitled Already on the Shelf Queer Readings of Award Winning Children's Literature, um, the authors, Ryan and Herman Wilmers, discuss four books: Where the Wild Things Are, The Other Side, Tale of Disbro, and Bridge to Terabithia. Uh, Now, some of my sisters loved those last two books. I have never read them, which is why I'm uh, kind of just referring in on Where the Wild Things Are. Um, but reading this book through a queer lens, it really is kind of a fascinating exercise, um, as a way to really see the inner world of children. Um, and some of it, you might be thinking, "Ugh, Rachel, what are you even talking about right now?" Right? Because Max in this story, the child in the story, he gets sent to bed without any supper because he is behaving terribly. Um, you know, I believe that Where the Wild Things Are was published in the mid 1970s. It's hard to believe a children's book letting that fly today. um, for a bunch of other reasons, but right, Max gets sent to his room because he's acting like a. And basically, you might say that he's just acting like a regular little boy, right? Um, but he imagines this whole world for himself, right? Where the wild things are. He is acting in a wild way. Everybody in his world that he creates is matching his energy, right? Um, but here's to me where the queering comes in, right? Kind of that subversion of social expectations that um, we would maybe expect to see. Um, because Max doesn't just copy the wild adults in this world that he has created. He also begins copying adults in the real world too. Um, And he does this by creating a home for himself, um, that is, um, like, that would be broadly considered to be pretty desirable, right? Um, eh, right, I'm thinking about, right, like, he built this cute little structure, it's got curtains, um, it has care, and that's where that subversion of social expectations really comes in. Right, reading about a little boy and then bringing care into that, those are not things that are usually gonna go together, right? Um, Now I think that there are a lot of us, and I'm certainly included in this, that have little boys in our lives who are, the sweetest and most caring little humans that you could ever hope to know. Um, but that's in real life, right? When we're looking in the media, we're not usually seeing that demonstrated. Um, and that can be really interesting, right? To see how are children playing? How are they um, performing those gendered expectations in the world that are kind of being foisted upon them, right? Um, but they're maybe doing it in a way, to those of us who have been around for a little while, seems a little weird, right? Um, but Max, very tellingly, draws on his own strengths, experiences, and creativity to navigate this world in between times. Um, or kind of in between spaces, right? Like, um, and the wild things don't like it. His parents may not like it very much, right? Like, much like Audrey's parents did not like a lot of what she was doing as a child. Um, but I think that as we think about these foundations of identity, right? Like, what are the social expectations that we're placing on our children? And not just, right, like the children that we ourselves have made, but the, the children in our lives, right? Um, how can we really take those expectations and transform them into moments that both nurture our own inner child and what we needed at the time, um, and create safe spaces for the people who are new to being a human, creating that safety for them to engage in self exploration without being harmed. Um, Now, as we are closing out this week, one thing that I'm really hoping that you will think about is really what are some of those foundational experiences that you had as a child that are informing your sense of self now? Um, and just if you want to share them, then that is fantastic. And if you don't, if you just want to keep them to yourself, then that is also awesome. I'm certainly not owed any of your inner monologue. Um, yeah, I really feel like I've kind of been running my mouth here a little bit, but I cannot express just how grateful I am that you spent time in your evening here with me, kind of just talking about this. Um, I hope that we can all spend some time thinking about kind of those experiences that we had as children, as young adults, and then also as adultier adults. um, to really create that sense of safety. Now, of course, as ever, there will be another module coming out on Monday. Um, so if you haven't subscribed, I'd encourage you to do so. That'll just get delivered right to your inbox. And I will see you again next Wednesday evening.